welcome to another episode of the Failed podcast. Let me start off by saying this. If you listen to podcasts, you obviously do, you're listening to this one. There's a new podcast called Sold a Story. I will put the link below. Please go listen to it. It is a PSA. The podcast is way more insightful than what I'm going to be right now. But it covers the topic of reading, being able to and not being able to. Growing up, I've talked to a lot of people that when you start asking and you start talking about it, you realize how many people struggle with the same things that you do, that we do, that I do. Reading being one of them. And so for me, growing up, life was tough. Life was challenging because I couldn't read. I don't know why or if I could have done anything. I look back at it not as harping or not letting go, nothing like that, but it is my life story and it has made me who I am today. And so I heard this podcast and it speaks so many truths. It has filled in so many blanks that I was always curious about. I have become a good reader. I wouldn't say that I'm the best. My spelling is a lot better than where it probably should be because of the podcasting, of me teaching and doing what I have done for many years has forced me to develop on my own. And so I stumbled across this series, and it is so insightful. And so if you are a friend, right, and maybe an adult friend and you're struggling with reading, you just want some answers, you want some blank spots answered from your past, listen to this podcast that I'm recommending. Again, I will put the link down below. I might put a little picture of the icon right here as well. If I don't, then you're just going to see me do this. But the link will be below. I suggest you go listen to it. If you have youngsters, right, that are struggling reading, this is for you too. But if you're in middle school and you've been dealing with it for a while and, life is just hard, I understand. I was there at one point in my life. And so I'm going to read these 5 realities about people who struggle with reading. This may be obvious to you. These are obvious to me, but I wanted to put this episode out there to help change this. Deep down inside, I feel like this is one of my callings. What can I do to help people that are struggling with reading be able to read, right? So that's not the thing that holds them back from doing well in school, from going to college, or whatever it may be. But it's such a powerful thing. It does change the levels of how you obtain success, especially on a academic level, right? Reading is so crucial. And so here we go. I'm going to give you 5 realities about people who struggle with reading. The first one is this: it's not always due to the lack of intelligence. People often associate reading ability with intelligence, but many struggle with reading despite being smart and capable. Factors like dyslexia, ADHD, or even lack of early exposure to reading can impact reading ability without being a reflection of personal intelligence. And by the way, I just read that. At some point in my life, I couldn't do that. That was so difficult to do. And even now when I do that on camera or for a recording, I'm tapping into a very insecure part of my psyche, but I have to continue to confront it and just put it out there. And so sometimes I may read a bit robotic or a bit slow, but I learned that that's just who I am in that part of my life. And so I do it. I do it because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to develop it like I have been for the past 15, 20 years or more. I haven't even counted, but that's the first one. And so it's hard to separate that. When you struggle with reading, that's what you think. You think, man, I'm dumb, right? Maybe those words have come out of your mouth. Maybe they're the negative talk that's in your head. That's the negative talk that has been in my head. That's what I have told myself. That's what I've had to deal with. And that's not true. There's many answers to why someone struggles, why someone didn't advance in reading. Again, the podcast Sold a Story in the link below will give you way, way, way more insight to what I'm telling you, but I'm just motivating you not to give up, not to be ashamed, right? Because you can't, because we can't read. It can be taught at any age. We prefer it in the early stages of our education, first, second, third grade. That's when our brain is like a sponge. It's the best time that's when it should happen. But when it doesn't, I want you to know that as an adult, you can still learn. It'll be a little bit harder, but there's ways. Here's number 2. Reading struggles can cause anxiety and shame. I almost don't want to read the description, but isn't it true? From a personal perspective, those two things, oh my gosh, whenever I was in a class setting and we were reading out loud and then it was coming around to my turn, talk about the anxiety, I would start almost sweating and almost in my head, I was trying to figure out a way, how can I talk myself out of being passed, excuse myself. That was the worst feeling. And shame, feeling dumb, like I said a while ago for number 1. But that shame, no one likes to be shamed. It's almost like a weapon that people use against you when they try to shame you, especially in this day and age of the internet, internet shaming and all of that. It's powerful. How much more worse is it when it's something that it's used against yourself? Adults and children alike may feel embarrassed or anxious about reading struggles, especially when required to read out loud or even when others see them, especially when we see others read effortlessly. It just becomes louder. This fear of judgment can make people reluctant to ask for help or practice openly. I struggled with asking for help for so long, but struggle openly I try to keep that to a minimum. I prefer just to talk, right? To go right off the cuff. But I went through years and years, and just 10 plus years, and I would write out whatever I was teaching when I was doing public speaking. I was speaking to people, and I would force myself to read what I wrote because I was trying to work out that muscle. I was trying to overcome that anxiety and shame. Now, it's not really afforded to everyone. If you don't have a group, or if you don't have a microphone or people around you, then why? People will avoid this for the rest of their lives. And so the goal is not to do that. The goal is to try to, like it says here, ask for help or practice openly. Practicing openly is so important, but it is very difficult to allow others to see you struggle in your reading. For me, I struggle, but I don't know. I'm trying to overcome it because I do want to be the story of the kid who couldn't, who learned, and has excelled when it comes to reading and writing. I added writing there, but they kind of go hand in hand because when you learn to read, you can also write the words that you're reading because you're comprehending, you're learning the words, right? And so because I wasn't a good reader, I wasn't a good writer. And that was number two. Here's number three. They often develop unique coping strategies. People who struggle with reading may create their own ways to get by, like memorizing words, using context clues, or relying on pictures. Some develop excellent listening skills or finding creative ways to follow along in school or work, which can sometimes mask their deficiencies. That's true. Memorizing for me, maybe it wasn't such a big role. But here's the other side of it. It says unique coping strategies, but coping strategies is also getting in trouble, being a knucklehead, like not being in that classroom where everyone's reading, like separating yourself from that. That also is a coping mechanism. So a lot of people who can't read, they tend to maybe get in trouble a little bit more, right? Because that's where they feel safe. They have to figure out a way so that they don't feel shame or embarrassment. And that's a coping strategy. Obviously, here it says using context or relying on pictures. Yeah, pictures are important, but at some point you're reading books with zero pictures, right? Reading for reading's sake with words is the goal. But when you're learning that, when you say pictures when you're really little, that's kind of what goes hand in hand. But even memorizing, yeah, I can see those as coping strategies. Some develop excellent listening skills and find creative ways to follow along. I mean, the whole thing, the whole failed podcast, me communicating, me pushing storytelling, communication, right? Confidence and connections. That whole thing is like a coping strategy. But I'm not trying to disguise what I struggled with. It exists. And as I'm listening to this new podcast, it makes me realize that others struggled with it out there, and there's these movements of bringing awareness. And so maybe this is my time. I want to bring more awareness to this subject. I don't know how I am going to turn around and help the community that struggle with reading. If you're a parent, reach out to me. If you're a friend and you struggle with reading, reach out to me. Let's talk. Let's figure something out. I don't know what the solution is here. There's a lot of programs out there already in existence, but maybe something needs to be ran through my life experience to connect with my younger self that went through that struggle. I don't know what that is yet. But again, this is a PSA. This is a public service announcement. If you cannot read, that doesn't have to be the end all. There's not a period at the end of that statement in your life. I have flipped things around on my own for survival, right? Because of who I want to be, because I was a youth leader, because I was doing podcasting, because I was writing, because I wanted to have a book, because I love to speak and all this stuff. And so I kind of had to, right? If I wanted to enjoy the talents that I have. But I mean, that's one of the greatest things I think an ability that people can have, and that's the ability to be able to read. Here we go. Number 4, there's often a lack of accessible resources. While resources are growing, there are always wider available. They're not always widely available or affordable. Many who struggle with reading don't have access to the specialized help or tools they need, especially in schools or communities where literacy resources are limited. I don't have the data on this. I don't know about these programs, but I know there's tutoring. I know stuff can be expensive, whether it's training to be a better volleyball player, tutoring to be better at math or reading. But in the description below, right, told the story, click on the link, it talks about all of this. And it gives you some facts, it gives you some resources that are out there and the lack of them, and how people have been able to obtain them, and how people don't even know about them, and even knowing about them cannot obtain them for whatever reasons. It's also something that I would like to see changed here in Fort Worth around my community. I don't know. It always starts with you and your community. Obviously, it's amazing to think big, think how many people can I help? But can you help your community? That's my motivation. I want to help my community. Number 5, here we go. With the right support, reading skills can improve. I agree. I improved my reading skills. I didn't have support. I just had to do it because of what I wanted to do, who I wanted to be. But I can't even imagine how much faster I would have progressed with the right support. Yeah. And there's no reason why you can't have that support right now, or just change your mind from saying I can't to I will, and put some effort towards learning and changing that reality about you. Even for adults, it's possible to improve reading skills with the right support and dedication. Programs that are tailored for people with dyslexia, individual tutoring, and multi-sensory learning approaches have helped people make significant progress at any age. That's the motivation. Obviously, I want young people. I'm tired of young people being left behind. Third, fourth grade, and they're struggling. They don't improve or become great readers by the time they're in middle school. And I can only imagine, because of firsthand experience, how hard high school is. Forget college and the tests that are required so that you can go down that path. It just continues to get difficult. And so there are ways, right? With the right support, reading skills are possible. I'm here to say that is absolutely true. But first, you have to be honest with yourself and say, I am struggling. I need to learn. Reach out to someone, right? Send us a message. I am going to put a little bit of energy and see if there's something that I can do for my community to bring more awareness to this topic. And the ultimate goal is to be able to give reading to a younger version of myself, or some young people that are struggling, to kind of just show them not to give up on themselves. Maybe they're just one program or some kind of training or tutoring thing away from becoming great readers. And so that's what today is about. I just wanted to make this as a PSA. And yeah, if you're listening to this and it's speaking to your reality, let me help. All right, let's start by me hearing your story, right? Because I believe in the power of storytelling, and I believe that if you've struggled with this, there's a story attached to it. I want to know what it is, because I want to add the next chapter of that story that says, I changed my mind at this point. I said, I'm going to be a great reader. And then you're going to look 10 years in the future, you're going to look back and say, I'm glad I made that decision. And so that's what I got today in this unique episode here at the Failed podcast, right? Failure isn't permanent, man. Failure is just like, hey, it's like an alarm saying you could fail completely, or you can learn from this failure and grow from it. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So my name is Sam Esquivel, and I have struggled with reading all my life. And it has been the source of anxiety and shame, and it has caused me to make bad decisions to avoid that anxiety and shame in my past, but I overcame it. But I wish I could have seen how much further along I would have been if I had the right help, or if I just spoke up and had the right resources around me. But that wasn't my case, but that doesn't have to be the case for you. And so stay tuned. I am motivated right now. Listen to the podcast that I've been talking about, Sold a Story. The link is below. I'm going to do this again. Here's the icon so that you can go and listen to it. And thank y'all so much for tuning in to this episode of the Failed Podcast. And y'all have yourselves a great day.